Cheryl, thanks so much for joining us today on the Thrive in Wabash County podcast. I'm just so excited for the opportunity for our listeners to get to meet the people behind a lot of the great initiatives and things going on in our community. And Daniel's Place is at the top of that list. So thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks so much for asking me. I'm always happy to talk about Daniel's Place and the amazing things we do, and really the amazing things that happen in Wabash.
Absolutely. Cheryl, I'm really excited to get to talk about the exciting progress with Daniel's Place and what's to come in the next few months here and in the next year. That our listeners, if they haven't heard of Daniel's Place, they'll get to really read and see Daniel's Place, as you've experienced a lot of success and been a part of a lot of the community-wide efforts and initiatives with the Stellar Pathway designation and what that allows this project to do moving forward. So we'll get into all of those details. But before that, for our listeners, just a little bit about yourself, your story and where you came from, and then Daniel's Place for the listeners that may not be as familiar.
Absolutely. I am a transplant into Wabash County. I was born in northeastern Ohio, went to Manchester College, and have been here ever since. Daniel is my son. He's currently 25. I actually have two children, Aaron and Daniel, single mom. Daniel has some pretty profound disabilities. He's 3 foot tall, 70 pounds. At 25 years old, has probably the mentality of about a 2-year-old. We still change diapers. We still use a feeding tube for medicines, those sorts of things. When Daniel was growing up and his sister was around, I kind of had a second set of hands. She was an amazing individual. She grew up with a brother with some different abilities and some struggles, and so she had the empathy and the maturity of someone well beyond her years. When she went to college, I was faced with the realization that my second set of hands had gone away. I was going to never go to the grocery store by myself again. It was always a 24/7 job to take care of Daniel, but I always had some help, and I was on my own again. Erin traveled for college, and I wanted to go see her, and I realized I really didn't have any place for Daniel to stay while I was gone. There are some facilities that look like hospitals, just not some place with my mother's heart that I could leave Daniel while I was traipsing around South America having fun with his sister. So I researched and I looked and I visited places. And as I was about to give up, I found Agape Respite Care in Bern, Indiana. And I remember driving over there and just the tears were running down my face. And the young woman who was with me, Chloe, said, why are you crying? I said, because if this isn't it, I don't know what I do now. This is really my last resort. And I walked into that facility and it was beautiful. And it was like walking into somebody's home, and the guests were smiling, the caretakers were smiling, and everyone was just loving and welcoming. Daniel stayed there. I got to spend time with my daughter. He loved it there. I loved it for him. And I came back to North Manchester and went to Erica Vogel at the special needs in her RISE classroom, and with lots of paperwork and lots of information, and said, oh my gosh, this place is amazing. First of all, you have to tell all your students, tell all your parents, there is help. And then kind of off the cuff, my dream would be to have something like this in North Manchester and Wabash County. And I walked away and thought for a little bit and thought, you know what, why not? It was so eye-opening for me to be able to let someone else take care of Daniel so that I could come back and be mom for a little bit. I didn't have to be caretaker. I didn't have to be everything. I could enjoy my son again as a son, as opposed to, and maybe that sounds funny, I could let myself be just the mom and really enjoy that. It was an amazing, amazing thing. So in 2017, I gathered up with Amanda Toish and Erica Vogel, and we started kind of laying the groundwork. The passion was such that from the time we incorporated until we saw our first guests and had our C3, it took us 11 months. So it was a lot of hard work, but really with passion and just wanting to share with other parents that experience that I had, that freedom of knowing that there was help.
Cheryl, I've heard you often talk about Agape, which is the facility that you experienced, right? But then now, so every day with what you all do at Daniel's Place, is that as a caretaker, as a full-time caretaker, you're 100% on all the time, right? And so the opportunity for you to go have that experience with Aaron and travel like you speak about, but then come back so refreshed, right? And be that much better of a caretaker for Daniel because of having that respite and that opportunity to leave.
Yeah, and I tell people sometimes that it's a shame that the recycling people got their logo with the two arrows that go around because, part of what we do is twofold. At Daniel's Place, we love our guests. We want to bring them into an inclusive, accepting, beautiful environment where they are loved and cared for and seen. The other half of that, we want those parents to know, to feel how loved and taken care of, that those parents are able to relax. They're able to let go. They're able to kind of sigh and take that breath and take care of themselves. So we want to take care of the caregivers by taking care of our guests. And it's really a cyclic process there.
Absolutely. And for a parent, I can imagine to not have that stress while you are taking that time for yourself, right? Of, I wonder what experience my child is having while I'm not with them when you're used to being there 100% of the time as the primary caretaker.
Absolutely. And, I talk to parents or husbands, wives. At Daniel's Place, I have a tendency to talk about kids because my experiences with my son, but we have guests. We take individuals, we have guests from birth to end of life. So some of our caregivers are spouses, elderly spouses that bring their spouse to us, or adult children, all ages. So many of our guests can't even advocate for themselves. And I know that as a parent, I spent my entire life caring for Daniel. I knew his every need. I knew that it was exhausting. I knew he would be up in the middle of the night. So I know other parents, other caregivers who have family, they have grandparents and aunts and uncles. But I also know that I personally got to the point where this was not grandma's cross to bear. And when I would leave Daniel with grandma, I spent a lot of time, well, what if he kept her up all night? What if he knocked the lamp off the counter? What is grandma going through? What kind of hardship is this for her? And when I left him with Agape, I was relieved of that. These were professionals who understood Daniel, who weren't family, but were professionals and were taking care of him. So I didn't have the worries of what if he gets up at night, those sorts of things. So as counterintuitive as it sounds, it was actually easier for me to let go knowing that he was at Agape than if he was at grandma's or Uncle Mick's or something like that.
Absolutely. As I've heard you often talk about, he pulled up and felt like it was Rich Aunt's house, right? It
Exactly,
was the Rich Aunt's
exactly.
house. It wasn't the institutional feel.
Correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that first, we started out slow. He stayed just a couple hours. And then I left him over for 2 nights, obviously, before I went out of the country. And, I would text and say, "Hey, how's Daniel?" "Well, I think he's bowling." "Oh, okay. Well, they went bowling, or they went to Walmart together." And so it was someplace where he went and he wasn't a number. He wasn't somebody in a bed in a room someplace. He had a friend there who took him to Walmart and took him bowling and went outside to swing with him. And so it really was a vacation for Daniel as well.
Absolutely. So, Cheryl, I've had the fortunate opportunity to get to know you really since 2020
Mhm.
and get to experience all of the great work you're doing with Daniel's Place and this project from a variety of different roles since we've known each
Mhm.
other. But real quick, before we get into some of that, 2017, you spoke about on your way back
Mhm.
from Agape, you knew that was it. You have this vision. You sit down with a few community leaders here to put it together.
Mhm.
What does Daniel's Place look like in the first couple years until you and I had the chance to connect about the new facility?
Yeah, the first couple of years, so we were fortunate enough. Zion Lutheran Church, that's been our home since we saw our first guest in 2018. They've been very generous, remodeled a couple old nursery classrooms for us, have given us office space, and have just donated all of that to us. We started out, my daughter Erin was one of our caregivers. She did some office work. We really were kind of a ragtag group of, we know we want to help. Agape was amazing. They sent us all their handbooks and anything we needed. Anytime we'd have a guest that I'd say, "Oh my gosh, here's the situation. What do I do?" They were right there with us, walking alongside us and holding our hands. And I'm so grateful to them. They have such an amazing facility, and to be able to learn from them and have them as a mentor has really made this a lot easier. So we started out, we were in the church, had the space we needed, had grand dreams, obviously. In fact, my daughter Erin and I were driving in North Manchester, and at the corner of 7th and Market, where we'll build the new facility, there was an abandoned bowling alley, and it had a for sale sign. And sometimes I'm a little spur of the moment, and Erin and I stopped in front of it, and I said, when we have our own house, this would be an amazing location. There's the park, the early learning center, the libraries down the street, the pool. And Aaron said, "Oh my gosh, Mom, it would." And so we drove up 2 blocks, and instead of going left to go home, we went to the bank. And by the time we got home for lunch, we owned a bowling alley. And just knowing that, believing way back then that this is needed, we're going to need a facility and we're going to need a place in North Manchester to house this. So Aaron and I bought the bowling alley and kind of tended to it until Daniel's Place was ready to take on this next big project, and then deeded it over to Daniel's Place. Dr. Zybus sold us a couple lots next to it, so we have a big, beautiful location for this house. We had a lot of growing pains in the beginning. As I said, Aaron was instrumental in starting Daniel's Place, in that vision, in instilling, in sharing that passion with me. And unfortunately, in 2021, Aaron passed away. For obvious reasons, Daniel's Place was not, I didn't have the capacity to do anything with it anymore. She was my partner. She was my sounding board. She was who I kind of strived to be. The way I would see her take care of our guests and connect with them and love them. And now she was gone. The people who carried on with Daniel's Place during that time were amazing. Individuals that we'd hired as caregivers stepped up and did the office work. They did the scheduling. The families knew that there was a big change and they hung with us. We were just at the end of COVID, so things had been in turmoil for a long time. And when I came out of that darkness and that grief from losing Aaron, I came back to an organization that had learned how to exist without me, had persevered as much as I had persevered, and had developed and taken on that love and that passion that Aaron and I had. And I think you still see that today. You know, this organization, it's obviously named after my son who had those needs, but it is really a love story for both of my children. It is a tribute to them and just the love of a mother.
Absolutely. Cheryl, wow. Those qualities that you admire about Aaron and what you see reflected in Daniel's Place today, I would say, just in knowing you the last several years, are what you embody every single day. And I believe that Erin was that way because of you, right? And how you raised her.
Thank you.
And so it's just to get to see the organization and you work every single day in our community is really, really special.
Thank you.
So thank you for sharing that. I think that's important for our listeners to know the story behind Daniel's Place. Now we're in a unique time with the organization, a really special time with the organization to see this facility come to fruition. And a lot of our community members and people, not just from this area, right, will get to reap the benefits of the new Daniel's Place facility and get to work with the organization more closely. I think what's often gets lost, though, when we see new buildings or new things coming out of the ground is the story behind the organization. So thank you for being willing to share that.
Of course.
So 2020, I'm fresh out of college at Manchester University, and you and I have the opportunity to meet because the first company that I worked for right out of school was the commercial construction company and design group who you were talking about the Daniel's Place project with.
Right.
And so you and I got to connect in that way. Fast forward, you continue to develop this project, move through design. And I often say the work that we do, right? It's to prepare a project, move it to where all it's missing is money, identify the money, secure the money, implement the project, right? And Daniel's Place, in your story, is a story of that, right? In 2020, you had this vision, the organization's ready to take it on, you move the project through design. Then all of a sudden I switch roles and I'm in the Director of Imagine 185 role, and we're working together on the project to keep moving it farther along. The Stellar Pathways opportunity presents itself, right? Large grant funding opportunity to the Office of Community Rural Affairs. And the tight timeline and what Okra was looking for were projects that support quality of life and quality of place for rural communities. And they were looking for projects that were shovel ready, right? They were on a shelf. They were rooted in community engagement. The impact was there, and there was a gap in the funding that their funding could bring projects across the finish line. Daniel's Place, obviously, had positioned because of your hard work, positioned itself for that opportunity that ultimately became successful. But if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about the work through the design process and then all of the work that you've done to identify and secure funding to where all it was missing was that gap that positioned itself to be one of our stellar projects.
Sure. So yeah, it seems like a long, long time ago that we started those first designs for Daniel's Place. And at the time, Erin was still with us, and she was a big part of that. I'm a I work in IT. I'm a very analytical person. I love numbers, and Erin was the polar opposite. Her heart was in, Mom, if we're going to have this population in our building, we have to add this. We have to have this feature. We need these things. And so she was really, she was really just instrumental in the design of that as we went through that process. Modeled it a lot after Agape. What we learned from them, we took information from them and got this on a piece of paper and got a price for it. Because I struggled a lot with how do I ask for money if I don't know how much I need? So Daniel's Place was fortunate to be in a position. We had a very generous funder from Southern Florida who gave us the money to work through those lean years and to afford us the luxury of actually paying to have those drawings done and that facility on paper so that we knew what we were getting, we knew what we wanted, we knew how much it cost, and we could have that visual to be our finish line.
I'll never forget when the first MKM Architecture and Design, right, that group that's worked on all the design, put together that first rendering of the inside in the
Right.
large open room and then the outside always helps, right? Obviously in fundraising efforts, but even for you, that moment had to be fulfilling.
Absolutely. That was to see what was in my head and in my heart finally on a piece of paper so that I could show people instead of just trying to stumble through my words and explain what my vision was. They did a great job of putting it on paper, just listening to all the harebrained ideas we had and kind of bringing that to life. So it was beautiful. And those renderings I still have today. Those are still the ones that I show people. They're so true to what our dream was and what our dream is.
And true to what we'll see,
It's
right?
for
When the
true to what we
facilities
will see.
finally go to ground.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Cheryl, you have absolutely been, I always say, worked your tail off in garnering support for this project and continue to do so, right? To raise money for an operating endowment to operate the new facility and the organization moving forward and all those pieces. You positioned the project to where it was missing around $1 million, just over $1 million, right? To get across the finish line
Right.
for the project. Ultimately, that allowed the project to be included in our Stellar Pathways application. Stellar Pathways, just for the listener in case they've missed prior episodes, but is a revamp of the Stellar Communities program that the Office of Community Rural Affairs had. City of Wabash was one of the first Stellar communities back in 2014. Fast forward, they revamped the program to be called Stellar Pathways, and they asked counties across the state of Indiana to collaborate with all their local units of government and to put together essentially an application to the state for projects that supported quality of life and quality of place in rural communities. We felt, because of all the collaborative efforts that we've been doing here in Wabash County, we were extremely well positioned. And like any of those opportunities, the list of projects is long, right? Of the different things
Absolutely.
we would like to see move forward. Daniel's Place was on that list, right? When we really started to sit down and think through what is going to be the story of Wabash County, right? Obviously, population decline has been something that we've rallied behind here. But really, what came out was that we want to be a place for all people. Wabash County wants to create a place for all people, was the theme of our stellar application. Daniel's Place, for obvious reasons, is that amenity that I always say is not just an amenity for the town of North Manchester, not just for Wabash County, but really for the entire state and region, being that Agape is the only other facility of its kind in northern Indiana, right?
Absolutely. And there are many other, and I say that will be only the second like facility. I really want to preface that we have other wonderful facilities in town, Pathfinders and the Ark. There's a gap in their service. You're not going to get 2 hours of respite care from Pathfinders on a Sunday afternoon. They have limited hours, they have those things. So, we fill that gap in there. We don't have structured programming from 8 to 3 like a Pathfinders does, but, we're open 7 in the morning till 11 at night, 7 days a week, 363 days a year to fill that gap where family members really have that need, to make sure that mom and dad can go out on a date, that those things can happen. So this is only the second facility like that in the northern half of the state. And we talk about the fact that we positioned Daniel's Place to be ready for the Stellar Grant with some of those big donations we got from other places. It's easy to do that when you can tell a story and people see the need. That let me know and everybody else in the organization that we're heading in the right direction. And the fact that Agape, for summer overnight stays, their dance card is full by February. So obviously there are so many more families who need this. And I tell you, it's not a want, it is a need. I used to get mad at my brother, ironically, who would complain about is empty nest syndrome. Empty nest syndrome is not anything I will ever know. And that's true for a lot of families. And not only families with children, but maybe go back to that if a spouse then needs care in elder years. So I used to think it was kind of a hidden demographic of people that had that emphasis, that restraint or put on their life, that they had that 24-hour care. And I'm hoping through Daniel's Place that becomes a population that we see more. We see, sometimes you see maybe the child in a wheelchair, the elderly person in a wheelchair at the grocery store. How many times does your mind go to who's caring for them and what, wow, how hard a job is that? How constant of a job is that? And so that's part of our hope at Daniel's Place, is that we as Wabash County, for it's a place for everyone, recognizes everyone and some of those hidden people in the background that are working so hard to take care of their family members.
Absolutely. You come down to Indianapolis. We're announced as a finalist for Stellar,
Right?
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 You come down to Indianapolis for the final presentation. There were 4 finalists, right, of
Right.
all the applicants, 4 finalists, but there were only 2 winners. And so we prepare this presentation that we go down to the state and to all the state agencies, make that presentation, and then ultimately are funded. But just if you wouldn't mind, being that most of the folks at that presentation were elected officials or leaders of community-based organizations
Mm-hmm.
like yours is, but speak a little bit about what that experience was like to get to go down in front of people that most of which had probably never heard of Daniel's Place before, but that you got to tell your story and the story of Daniel's Place.
Yeah, of course. First of all, I was so humbled, and that the Imagine 185 and the Stellar, they're the group that chose the projects for the Stellar Pathways grant, selected Daniel's Place. There are so many worthy causes that it was really humbling and just amazing to be recognized in that way. I've never spoken at the State House before, and I've never been in front of that kind of group, but it's a story that's easy to tell when you live it every day, when you love it every day, when it comes from your heart. So when we went there, I just did my best to make sure that they didn't see just another person coming down to beg for their grant money, but saw that I am a mom with 2 incredibly wonderful, beautiful children who know what the challenges are for their families and individuals. And my passion is giving that gift to others. And so that was really my take going in, was just tell them your story, tug at their heart. If you can make them cry, all the better, because that means that their heart's touched by the story. And that's what makes Daniel's Place and the work that we do, I think, so it just opens people's hearts. That's what makes it attractive to so many people.
And it's so real, Cheryl. Like, it's so personal for you and it's authentic. You don't have to try. We were just talking about right before we started recording the episode, right? You recently have been asked by a media source to put together a letter, right, that goes out to parents who every day work with loved ones with disabilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm reading to this letter and on the verge of tears, so compelling, but it's just you, right? Like, you could speak because it's your story and it's so personal and authentic for you. And I think that we have a lot of great organizations in this community with fantastic leaders, and it's authentic through and through, right? But for you, your son's name is literally on the sign.
It's on the building, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's agreed. It is my passion. We all find those things in life that we just want to make a difference, and that is this for me. My kids are my life. We talk about it being my story and so easy to tell. I think that's part of the success of Daniel's Place as well, is as a parent of a nonverbal young man, I know the fear of he can't advocate for himself. Nobody else knows what he needs. Not to mention, as a parent, there is some guilt of, I'm his mom, I'm supposed to take care of him. What do you mean I need help? So I think that when families come to Daniel's Place, and not only do they get sympathy for their situation and the amount of work, but they get empathy. I know what it's like. I know how the guilt of, I've never left him anyplace else before. Do you know what you're doing? And that empathy is there. And so we can speak one-on-one to those parents and say, I get it. I understand. I was scared too. I felt guilty too. And it's going to be good. It's going to be okay. And so there are a lot of tears shed in those initial meetings with parents. And I really think that empathy is just fundamental in who we are.
Thanks for sharing that, Cheryl.
Of course.
The new building, the bowling alley, for those not familiar,
Right.
is right across on 7th and Market Street, right across from the Early Learning Center, as you said, right next to Warville Park, really on a main thoroughfare with a lot of different community assets and amenities and more to come right in the next
Right.
few years,
Right.
right on that corridor there in North Manchester. Total project cost is around $3.5 million for full construction. The stellar portion of that is around $1.1 million. Talk a little bit about schedule and when people can plan to start to see the building come out of the ground and get to monitor that progress and construction over the next couple of
Of
years.
course. So you and I have been working very hard on that Okra grant and the timeline and meeting those deadlines and what we need to do from a paperwork standpoint to make that happen. We've had so many generous people come through, AWS Foundation, anonymous donations, huge anonymous donations. I'm not even going to start naming people because I'm going to forget somebody and it's going to be horrible. But the money it's been amazing, the outpouring of love and support for this project. So we had a public hearing this morning for the Okra grant. We're looking at going out to bid in September till the paperwork is done, probably signing on with contractors, signing those construction papers in a January timeframe. And then as soon as we are done with that, we're gonna knock a bowling alley down and start construction.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm so excited to see it starting. We've put a sign up out front to let everybody know where we are and that we're gonna start on that. I think you mentioned a little bit before where we have these amazing grants from Okra and the United Ways and AWS and lots of other places. I'm not satisfied just to have the money to build a building right now. And now I'm going to tear up, Alex. Erin didn't get to see this through. So for her legacy and for Daniel, I want to make sure that we have a facility that is going to be here for generations to come. So in my fundraising fury, it is not just to be able to write the check to build the building. It is to set up an endowment to make sure that Daniel's Place, when I am long gone, still has the backing it needs, the funding it needs. We are still, Wabash County and North Manchester are still that place that families can come and get that respite and rest.
And I am confident that Daniel's Place will be around long after you're gone someday because of the community support and rallying around to raise this operational endowment to make sure that that's the case. You may be long gone, Cheryl, but Daniel's Place will still be rooted in those same values and principles that Erin instilled in the organization and that really you from the beginning have instilled. So I believe in that firmly. And if individuals want to support Daniel's Place and raising to ensure that that's the case and the great work your organization continues to do pre and post facility, where can they go more to learn more about Daniel's Place, to get involved, to volunteer, to donate?
Sure. The easiest place is to go to our website, www.daniels-place.org. There you'll find information on our services, volunteer opportunities, employment opportunities. From a financial standpoint, there's a donate now button. So we have a fund at the Community Foundation of Wabash County, so people can contribute to the Daniels Place Fund there. We always need in-kind gifts. We need a lawn that needs mowed all summer at a bowling alley that we're not occupying yet. Things like that. The Donate Now button, there are opportunities for capital campaign funding there, but we also have needs just to stay operational. Part of our mission, Alex, is that we will turn nobody away because of their financial situation. So we don't take respite waivers from the government. We don't take insurance. We're a self-funded organization. And like I said, we want to meet people where they have needs. We want to make sure it's affordable. We don't want to ever turn anybody away. So we have kind of a scholarship fund, a financial aid fund for families that can't afford it. So always looking for contributions to help support those families who financially might not be able to afford it. We'll take them anyway. We'll take everybody and we need help. So lots of ways to get involved and help. If your heart is in this, if we've touched your heart a little bit and it's a journey, you want to come along with us. We're starting programs for planned giving so that if this is something that in your estate for some planned giving, that's all good. We would love to be part of that as well. Sustaining gifts are, obviously what keep an organization going. So happy to talk with anybody. I will personally take a phone call from anybody who wants to talk about Daniel's Place and talk about how they can get involved.
Absolutely. I will be sure for our listeners to include the Daniels Place website and some of the resources Cheryl was talking about in the show notes. So go check those out, and you can click on that link directly to take to Daniels Place's website and to find more information. Cheryl, you speak about the position Daniels Place is in today and the generosity of Wabash County and this community. We often talked about how fortunate we are to live in Wabash County and in a community that really rewards and supports at a very generous and philanthropic level individuals and leaders and organizations who have the vision, who work their tail off every day to bring that vision to a reality. And Wabash County continues to step up to support that. And I think Daniels Place embodies that and will continue to embody that moving forward.
Absolutely. We are very fortunate to live in Wabash County. You know, you and I are both not native Wabash County individuals. Both came to North Manchester to go to college and found something in this community that just kept us here. It's the people, it's the generosity, the love for their neighbors. It really is. It's where I call home and where I will always call home.
Absolutely. On that, Cheryl, we've heard a lot of your story, how we got Daniels Place, where it's at today. Talk a little bit about being in Wabash County from Daniels Place perspective. And it truly takes a village. We talk about that all the time to bring these things to fruition. Talk about the community, the support, the different, you mentioned some specific individuals, no need to do that unless
Sure.
you're comfortable, but who are some of those folks or other entities that have just been crucial in the journey for Daniels Place?
So when I started, the first thing that we looked at was we didn't have a C3 status, so we applied to the Community Foundation for fiscal sponsorship.
This
And
was not a commercial for the Community
this was not a
Foundation. That
commercial for
question was not meant to start there.
Alex wasn't there. Um,
Correct.
but Patty Grant was.
Yeah.
And I had long known Patty since I was in college. And so when I applied for this fiscal sponsorship, I've joked with her often that I would send the paperwork in and she'd take her red pen to it and she'd send it back. I'd fix it and I'd send it. And about the fifth time, I was getting a little angry. But the lesson I learned was invaluable. Patty was, in her way, teaching me what I needed to do. So the Community Foundation came on early as our fiscal sponsor, and that put us in the big people arena. You know, we weren't just coming out and asking for money now. We had the backing of the Community Foundation, and that led some credence to our cause. Then I went to we had something for causes. It was Keith Gillenwater and Grow Wabash County had
Yeah.
they did it for profits,
Yeah. It
and
was
then
an
it
entrepreneurship
was an
co-starters.
co-starters for causes, correct. So Julie Garber called and said, "Hey, I think maybe this would be good for you." So early on, I went through that program where they talked about philanthropy and legal aspect of things and marketing. And so, you know, Wabash County offered that to our local not-for-profits to really, you know, I'm an IT person who everything I've ever learned about a not-for-profit came from Google. And so to have members of our community who were specialists in those areas to spend their time in kind of a classroom setting with a group of us who were working for not-for-profits and give us that time and that expertise was paramount in I think the pace with which Daniel's Place was able to take off and probably minimized a lot of my mistakes. So we started out there again. Zion Lutheran Church gave us a home and have for probably more years than they expected to give us a home. They've been so generous. But there are so many other people in the community. I have a gentleman that I know was a long associated with Ford Meter Box that will go to lunch with me and just talk about philanthropy, talk about how to make those big asks. And so from the Kiwanis groups and the Rotary Club who would invite us and listen to our story and give us some money, to the individuals who would mentor me in a space that I was not comfortable with, didn't understand, but was jumping in with both feet. Churches and grocery stores. I have learned to ask with my heart for whatever I need, and someone in Wabash County is going to come through. Whether that need is a mentor for a human resources aspect of an organization, or it is 10 dozen hot dog buns for a Halloween fest.
It's the Wabash County way.
It's the Wabash County way. It absolutely is. It absolutely is. So you just, when there's a need, this community comes together and they fill it.
Absolutely. Cheryl, we've talked a lot about Daniel's Place's story, how it started, where it's at, where it's going. 10 years from now, what are people saying about Daniels Place?
My hope really, so we're building a 6-bedroom house, but we worked with MKM and designed it such that we can add on a wing. I hope in 10 years that I'm sitting here with you, Alex, and we're talking about raising money to add 6 more bedrooms, that we can just grow our footprint and help so many more families. Yeah, I'm hoping we're talking about a 12-bedroom house.
Cheryl, you are an integral piece of Wabash County and making it the place that it is to go home and really embody. We've talked a lot about Daniels Place. This is all while maintaining a full-time job at a major Wabash County employer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you want to talk at all to that and what your day job is.
So yeah, in my day job, I work in IT at Ford Meter Box. And so this has all been my evenings and weekends and late nights, vacation days. Ford Meter Box is very gracious. They encourage participation in the community. And so I'm so grateful to them for the support they give me as well. But yeah, this isn't my job. I'm not earning a salary from Daniels Place. In fact, I guess I've got quite a deficit when it comes to Daniels Place. But it's not a job for me. It's truly a passion, truly a passion.
And when we started this podcast, it was to tell those stories about the people behind the organizations. And I just think you embody that through and through.
Thank you.
And again, people get to see the exciting stuff and attend the groundbreakings or the ribbon cuttings or see the new facility or be a family that utilizes Daniels Place. But this story is so critically important and is what has gotten Daniels Place to where it's at today, where it's going to be at a year from now. And hopefully when we're sitting back here in 10 years talking about how we're going to raise money to build the expansion onto the Daniels Place facility.
Yeah, I am so grateful to this community. I don't know how many communities I could have done this in, to be honest with you. I just came here as a college student many more years ago than I choose to talk about. And Wabash County welcomed me. Now, you still kind of feel like I'm not native Wabash, and I don't know whose farm that was 4 generations ago, as Wabash County tends to be. But what I found is if you immerse yourself in this county, if you want to be here, they want you. If you love Wabash, Wabash loves you and supports you. So it's not about, are you from Wabash? Did you grow up in Wabash? It's, do you want to be in Wabash and do you love it? And there's room here for everybody and enough love and support to go around.
Thanks, Cheryl. Is there anything else you want to make sure that we capture as a part of this podcast episode that we haven't covered yet?
Just a big thank you. A thank you to everybody who's traveled with us along this way. Couldn't have done it without, you talked about the fact you were instrumental and you followed me kind of through this path, and I've leaned on you for a lot of things. And that goes for many, many more people and organizations. And I always, when I speak at organizations or any place, we really have 3 needs at Daniels Place. Obviously, we have a financial need. Also, it breaks my heart if somebody says, I wish I'd have known you were there. I wish I'd have known about you 2 years ago. I didn't know this existed. So for everybody who listens, everybody knows somebody who needs Daniels Place. And so I would just implore you to spread the word. Make sure that there's not a family in a 100-mile radius that needs us and doesn't know where we are. We welcome them and we want to take care of them. And third, it doesn't always take money to help. So there are lots of other ways. If you have a heart for this and want to volunteer, to stuff envelopes, to, come to a Halloween fest in October where we give away hot dogs to the town and help us do that. So those are the 3 things that I really ask everybody who knows about us to do, is help in any way, in any capacity you can, and make sure that people know about us.
You as a leader within our community and the leader of Daniels Place and Daniels Place as an organization are a part of the fabric of making Wabash County a quality place to live, raise a family, and really home for all people, as we've talked about. And so thank you for all of the great work that you're doing, that you've done, and that we're excited to continue to watch closely, that we know you'll do and support you along the way in the future here in Wabash County.
Well, thank you, Alex. Thank you.
Absolutely. This podcast is only made possible through the generous support of our donors. Thank you to the City of Wabash, the Gilman Investment Fund, the Sandra Kunkel Trust, Paperworks Industries, the Community Foundation of Wabash County, and Visit Wabash County.